I just had my baby after a really rough pregnancy. It was so complicated that I had to get a nephrostomy tube inserted through my back into my kidney to help it drain. This all started back in March. I faced multiple issues during my pregnancy, including preeclampsia, cholestasis, and gestational diabetes. Finally, in August, I welcomed my son. After 2 long months, I finally had surgery scheduled to remove the nephrostomy tube and address some other kidney issues. I also have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old to care for. Leading up to the surgery, I was in so much pain that I couldn't take any medication. I reached out to my family multiple times, asking for just a little help and support. Taking care of 3 kids, especially an infant, while dealing with severe pain and recovering from a C-section was exhausting. But my family insisted I didn't need help and told me to figure it out on my own. So I did. The Thursday before my surgery, a friend came over to help with the kids while I cleaned the entire apartment. On Friday, my mom came to stay with the kids while I was in surgery. Afterward, she took my 3-year-old home with her, and my 5-year-old went to his biological dad's place. That left me and my husband with just the infant. Over that weekend, while I was healing, my husband received a call that his dad was in the hospital and possibly dying. The imaging showed concerning things on his spine that could indicate cancer or infection, both terrifying possibilities. So on Saturday evening, just a day after my surgery, my husband took the baby, picked up our 3-year-old, and went to the hospital to see his dad. I stayed home because I felt lightheaded and dizzy from the surgery and decided to rest. When my husband returned, he asked if I could take care of the baby, but I could barely open my eyes. He took over, but he couldn't do the dishes that day. No big deal, we thought. We could handle it later. On Sunday morning, my husband had to go to work. I was left alone with the 3-year-old and the infant. When I got up, I tried to stand but fainted from dizziness. I managed to change the baby's diaper, but I was so unsteady that I set the dirty diaper on the floor by the bassinet and barely carried the baby to the living room. I put on Mickey Mouse for my 3-year-old and tried to lie down, but I fainted again and started hallucinating. I didn't know what was real anymore. Panicking, I called my husband, telling him something was very wrong and I needed to go to the hospital. He hesitated about leaving work early, so I called my dad for help. When my dad and stepmom arrived, my dad started yelling at me about the dishes and the overflowing garbage. He even pointed out a cupcake and some cheese on the floor and noticed the dirty diaper by the bassinet. I begged him to stop yelling and help me get to the hospital. Instead, my stepmom looked at my medications and insisted it was just a side effect. She gave me Tylenol and told me to sleep it off. They took the kids for a drive, but when they returned, they yelled at my husband about the trash, the dishes, and letting the toddler eat in the living room. I called for help at 10:30 a.m., and by now it was 6 p.m. They finally took my temperature, which was 102 and rising. I was fading fast. My husband rushed me to the hospital, where they immediately informed me that my kidney had become infected during surgery, and I was septic. The nurses were worried for me. My temperature shot up to 140, and I was so out of it that I didn't understand what was happening anymore. I was admitted for sepsis. While I was in the hospital, my dad exaggerated the situation to others, claiming my apartment was a disaster. Someone not known to me called CPS, alleging that my children were not being cared for and living in a pigsty. Meanwhile, I was literally fighting for my life in the hospital, hooked up to oxygen and multiple IVs. The morning after I got home, CPS knocked on my door and called me. I let her in and explained everything, how I was having a medical emergency, and that's why I called my dad, who chose to criticize instead of help. She looked around, was satisfied with what she saw, and said there was no case. she would try to close it as soon as possible. It's just so frustrating that in my time of need, I reached out to my dad for help, and instead of support, I got criticism. He didn't even ask for my side of the story before running his mouth, which led to someone calling CPS while I was in the hospital, fighting for my life.